My son's soft moan pulled me from a fitful sleep. I jolted awake, my hand flying to his forehead. It was burning like a hot coal. My heart felt as if it were being squeezed in a vice. Leo, my 5-year-old son, was feverish again. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. Just past 11 p.m. outside, New York City was still alive, but inside this sprawling Westchester mansion, the only sounds were my son's labored breathing and the frantic drumming of my own heart. I quickly grabbed a lukewarm washcloth to wipe him down, then took his temperature again, 102.2 F. The red number on the digital thermometer was a dagger to my eyes. Shaking, I fumbled through the medicine cabinet. I'd used the last dose of children's Modin that afternoon. We had to go to the hospital. I scooped his small, limp, and sweltering body into my arms and rushed out of the room down to the living room. My husband Ethan was still there, legs crossed on the sofa, scrolling through his phone and whistling a cheerful tune. He was dressed in a brand new designer outfit, his hair slicked back with gel, a packed travel bag resting beside him. "Ethan," I called out, my voice cracking with panic. "Leo's fever is dangerously high. We have to get him to the emergency room now." Ethan looked up, throwing me an annoyed glare. He furrowed his brow, that familiar frown he wore whenever I interrupted his leisure. "Can't you handle one kid?" His voice was cold, utterly devoid of concern. "He has a fever, so give him some medicine." "Why are you freaking out? We're out of medicine. And his fever is so high. I'm scared he'll have a seizure. We need to go, please, Ethan," I begged, tears welling in my eyes. Ethan stood up irritably, but instead of moving toward me, he reached for his suitcase. "Call an Uber. I have an urgent matter to attend to." "What could possibly be more urgent than our son?" I practically screamed. "Aren't we supposed to go to the Hamptons tomorrow? You promised you would take Leo and me." At the mention of the trip, Ethan's expression grew even crueler. He let out a sneer, a smile that disgusted me. "The Hamptons? You think you have the right to come? Look at yourself. You spend all day smelling like spit up and old takeout, and your clothes are a disgrace. You just embarrass me. This trip is for me and Jessica. Do you understand, Jessica?" The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Her, the beautiful young mistress he'd been seeing for months. I knew everything, but had bitten my tongue, hoping he would come to his senses for our son's sake. But tonight, he had openly admitted it, openly trampled on 6 years of marriage. What are you saying? How could you?" I stammered, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. "You're ruining the mood," Ethan snapped, pulling out his phone. "Hello, Jess. I'm on my way." "Yeah, just a small problem. My blind wife is causing a scene." He spoke into the phone with a sweet, loving tone, completely ignoring me as I stood frozen. Our feverish child in my arms. Hanging up, he stared at me with eyes as cold as ice. "Stay home. Don't you dare go anywhere and make a scene. If I find out you've ruined this trip for me, don't blame me for being cruel." With that, he dragged his suitcase toward the front door. Like a madwoman, I ran with our son in my arms, blocking the door of his car. "You can't go. Our son is terribly sick. You're his father. You can't just leave us like this." I pounded on the car window, sobbing in despair. Ethan rolled down the window, his face contorted with a malice I had never seen before. "Do you want to die? Move." When I didn't budge, he abruptly opened the car door, grabbed me by the hair, and dragged me back into the house. "Ah!" I screamed in pain. Leo, startled, began to wail in my arms. Without a shred of mercy, he pulled me through the living room toward the old, dark storage cellar at the back of the house. It was a damp, musty room used only for broken furniture and junk, the air thick with the smell of mildew and mice. He shoved my son and me inside. "Stay in here and reflect on your behavior. When you learn your place, I'll be back." He slammed the heavy wooden door shut. The dry, cold sounds of the bolt sliding and the lock turning echoed through the darkness. Each sound was a knife, severing my last thread of hope. "Ethan, open the door. Don't lock us in here. Our son's fever is getting worse." "Ethan." I pounded on the door frantically, screaming until my voice was raw. But the only reply was the sound of his car engine fading into the night. Powerless, I collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, clutching my son tightly. Leo was crying uncontrollably, his body growing hotter by the second. In the pitch black darkness, all I could hear was my child's gasping breaths, and the sound of my own heart shattering into a million pieces. My husband, the father of my child, had just callously locked his own wife and son in a cellar so he could enjoy a vacation with his mistress. Is there any hell more painful than this? What will be the journey of this woman to reclaim justice and her maternal love? Will the wicked pay their price? Please like and subscribe to Echoes of the Past and turn on notifications so you don't miss the dramatic developments in the next chapter. The thick cold darkness of the cellar swallowed us whole. The stench of mildew, mice, and old belongings assaulted my nostrils, making my chest feel even tighter. I sat on the freezing concrete floor, holding Leo close, trying to warm him with my own meager body heat. He had stopped crying hysterically and had drifted off in my arms, but his body was still burning, his breath short and rapid. I pressed my cheek against his forehead, the heat radiating off him like a fire. What could I do? Locked in here with no medicine, no water, my son wouldn't last long. Helplessness and despair tightened around my heart like an invisible vice, a pain so intense it was numbing. I scanned the darkness, searching for a glimmer of hope. The cellar's only window was high up, boarded over with wooden planks. A faint sliver of moonlight filtered through the cracks, casting thin streaks of light on the floor, not enough to see anything clearly. I could only sense the clutter of cardboard boxes and broken furniture piled around us. This was a prison my own husband had thrown us into. I took off my thin cardigan, dabbed it in my own tears, and gently wiped my son's forehead and neck, hoping it might cool him down even a little. He stirred, his dry lips murmuring in his delirious sleep. "Daddy, Ethan, Leo misses you." His innocent words were like 1,000 needles stabbing my heart. Fresh tears streamed down my face. Not for myself, but for him. He was too young to understand the cruelty of the father he adored. He still saw his dad as a hero, the greatest father in the world. He didn't know that his hero was now enjoying himself with another woman while his own son battled a high fever in a dark, filthy cellar. Memories of the past flooded back as vivid as if they were yesterday. I remembered the first day I met Ethan. He was a talented young architect and I was just an innocent, naive college senior. He came into my life like a prince with a warm smile and gentle eyes. He said he loved my simplicity and kindness. He said he didn't care that I was an orphan from a modest background. He promised to protect and cherish me for the rest of my life. I believed him. I believed all his sweet promises. I defied the disapproval of his mother, Eleanor, a woman who prized social status above all else, to become his wife. I thought that with his love, I could overcome anything. And for the first few years of our marriage, we were incredibly happy. He was a thoughtful husband. He would help with chores after work and massage my shoulders. On weekends, he'd take me for walks and we'd eat at food trucks I loved. When I was pregnant with Leo, he was overjoyed to the point of tears. He took care of my every need, forbidding me from doing any heavy lifting. He would press his ear to my belly and whisper to our son. During those days, I thought I was the happiest woman in the world. But when did it all start to change? Was it after his family's company hit a rough patch and he had to beg his mother for help? Or was it when Jessica appeared with her youthful charm and flattering words that opened his eyes? He started coming home later. Family dinners became rare. He no longer cared about my feelings, replacing them with sharp words and cold stars. He started listening to his mother unquestioningly, taking all my sacrifices for granted. He turned into someone else, a stranger, selfish and cruel. I tried to hold on. I tried to forgive. I lied to myself, saying he was just stressed from work, that he would soon return to being the husband I once knew. But I was wrong. Once a person's heart has changed, trying to hold on is futile. Mommy, cold. Leo's whimper brought me back to the brutal reality. I hugged him tighter, using my entire body to shield him from the cold concrete. His breathing was growing weaker. Leo, please don't scare Mommy. Hang on, son. Someone will come and save us, I whispered, though I didn't know who to believe in. Who would save us? Eleanor, my mother-in-law, who never once accepted me as her daughter. She was probably celebrating getting rid of the thorn in her side. My father-in-law, Arthur, was a quiet, reserved man. In all these years, he never interfered in our marriage, never stood up for me against his wife's bitterness. I couldn't count on him. I was truly at a dead end. I stared helplessly at the silent wooden door. Despair washed over me. Were my son and I going to die in here? Die in the cold, alone, and despised by the person I loved most? The thought made me shudder. No, I couldn't die. I had to live, to raise my son, to make the person who caused us this pain. But what could I do? Utterly exhausted, I could only hold my son and cry, hot tears rolling down my cheeks and onto his feverish face. Just as I felt the last flicker of hope dying out, I heard a strange sound from outside. Screech, scrape. It was faint, like metal grinding against metal, slow and dry. My heart leaped. What was that? Was it the wind blowing a branch against the roof? Or a rat gnawing on something? I held my breath, straining to hear another sound, this time clearer. Click, like someone was trying to pick the lock. Was it Ethan? Had he come back, or was it a burglar? Whoever it was, would they be our escape or another door to an even worse hell? The dry click of the lock turning echoed in the dead silence of the cellar and my entire body went rigid. All thoughts ceased, replaced by a primal fear that squeezed my chest. Who was out there at this time of night? My first instinct was to retreat deeper into the darkness, clutching Leo like a mother animal protecting her weak offspring. I covered his mouth, terrified that even the faintest whimper would be heard. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would burst from my throat. Outside, the scraping and clicking grew louder, more frantic. Someone was definitely trying to break in. Had Ethan changed his mind and come back? No, this didn't sound like a key. It was rougher, like someone using a hard object to pry the bolt open. A burglar? The thought sent a chill down my spine. If a burglar came in and found us, would he kill us to silence us? Or was it someone Ethan sent? Was he afraid I'd cause trouble and sent someone to teach me a lesson? 1,000 terrifying scenarios swirled in my mind. I felt like I was on the brink of madness. Crash. A loud bang erupted as the thick wooden door was kicked open by a powerful force from outside. The dim yellow light from the hallway spilled in, casting a tall, imposing shadow in the doorway. I held my breath, my eyes wide, staring at the silhouette. My hand instinctively grabbed a piece of rotten wood beside me, ready for a hopeless fight. The figure stepped inside, their gait a little unsteady, urgent. As the person moved into a patch of faint moonlight, I was stunned to realize it was my father-in-law, Arthur. I could hardly believe my eyes. He was in his silk pajamas, his graying hair a mess. His usually calm, stern face was etched with sheer panic and worry. He was panting, a steel crowbar, the tool he just used to break down the door, still in his hand. Chloe, are you okay? He called my name, his voice trembling and hoarse, stripped of its usual authority. When he saw us huddled in the dark corner, he quickly threw the crowbar to the ground and stumbled toward us. My God, that monster. He dared to do this to his own wife and child. He knelt beside me, his rough, shaking hand touching Leo's cheek. The heat from my grandson's body made him recoil. He's burning up. We have to get to the hospital now. It was only then that I came to my senses. Fear was replaced by stunned surprise and a flicker of hope. Dad. I burst into sobs, tears of relief, of terror, and of a belated gratitude. How did you know we were in here? He didn't answer immediately. He quickly took off his own robe, wrapped it around Leo, and lifted the boy into his arms. No more questions. Let's go. We have to save my grandson first, he commanded, his voice regaining its usual decisiveness. I scrambled to my feet, my limbs numb from sitting for so long, and staggered after him out of the cellar. In the living room, the lights were still blazing. Ethan's suitcase was gone. On the coffee table, 2 half-empty glasses of wine remained, a bright red lipstick stain on one rim, like a cruel mockery. Arthur didn't even glance at them. He just rushed straight to the garage. He placed Leo in the back seat and urged me to get in. Hurry, Chloe. The luxury sedan, which he normally only used for important events, now tore through the night like a wounded animal. I sat in the passenger seat, looking back at Leo, lying unconscious on the back seat, my heart aching. Dad, Ethan. I hesitated. He's gone. Arthur cut me off, his voice as cold as steel. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He left with that I saw everything. It turned out he couldn't sleep tonight. He had gone out onto the balcony for some air and happened to see Ethan's car leaving, but inside wasn't me and Leo. It was Jessica. A bad feeling washed over him, and he went downstairs to look for us. He found our bedroom empty and couldn't reach Ethan by phone. He searched the whole house until passing the cellar. He heard my faint, muffled sobs. I'm useless. I've been too lenient with him for too long, he ground it out, his voice filled with regret. I thought it was just a phase that he would come to his senses. I never imagined he could lose his humanity like this. I remained silent, tears streaming down my face again. So, he knew. He knew Ethan was cheating. He knew what I was enduring, but he had chosen to stay silent. That silence was perhaps another invisible knife that had helped push me into tonight's hell. The car sped down the empty street. The street lights flashed across his aged face, illuminating the deep wrinkles of pain and remorse. The hospital was only a few blocks away. I turned to look at my son. He was still unconscious, his breathing growing fainter. Hang on, my love, we're almost there, I whispered. Just then, Arthur's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He frowned and put it on speaker. Hello? A panicked, unfamiliar male voice came through. Excuse me, is this the emergency contact for the owner of the vehicle with license plate 51X? My heart skipped a beat. That was Ethan's license plate. Yes, I'm his father. What's wrong? Arthur growled. Sir, his car was just in an accident on the Long Island Expressway. It's very critical. My ears started to ring and everything went dark. Ethan in an accident right now just after he had heartlessly abandoned us for his mistress. A vicious sense of satisfaction flickered within me, but it was immediately replaced by overwhelming confusion. As much as I hated him, I never wished him dead. He was still my son's father. The phone slipped from Arthur's hand and fell to the floor. The car swerved dangerously. "Dad," I screamed, grabbing the steering wheel. Arthur was stunned. His eyes vacant, staring straight ahead. He muttered, "Retribution. It's divine retribution." The car screeched to a halt in front of the hospital emergency entrance. But now my mind was not only consumed with worry for my son, but also with a tangled mess of chaos. My cruel husband was lying on the brink of death, and my father-in-law, who had just rescued me from one hell, seemed to be sinking into another of his own. The night was far from over. The emergency room doors swung shut, sealing me off from my son's world. I stood frozen in the cold hospital corridor, my mind a complete blank. The sharp smell of antiseptic, the squeak of gurney wheels, the urgent calls of nurses, it all blended into a distant chaotic buzz. I couldn't hear any of it. In my ears, there was only the sound of Leo's weak, ragged breathing and the silent scream in my own chest. My child, my life was in there fighting for his life, and I could only stand here helpless. A thin hand rested on my shoulder. I turned. It was my father-in-law. Arthur's face was now ashen, his eyes bloodshot and vacant. "Chloe," he began, his voice raspy. "Ethan, he's in the ER down the hall." I followed his gaze. Not far away, another set of emergency room doors were lit up. I knew Ethan was in there. The husband who had ruthlessly pushed my son and me to the brink of death. A strange feeling crept over me. Not worry, not satisfaction, but a terrifying emptiness. Every emotion I had for that man seemed to have died in the cellar. Now my mind had room for only one concern. "Leo, you should go see how he is," Arthur said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on the doors to my son's room. "I'm staying here for Leo." My answer was brief but firm. Arthur stared at me, perhaps surprised by my coldness. But then, in his tired eyes, the surprise was replaced by a look of sorrow and understanding. He said nothing more, just stood silently beside me, both of us staring at the same door, two people waiting for two lives, but our hearts in two completely different worlds. Time crawled by, each second a form of torture. I paced back and forth, my hands clasped tightly in prayer. I prayed to God, to any divine being who could hear my plea. "Please save my son. He's so small, so innocent. Let me bear all the sin, all the retribution." Arthur slumped onto a waiting room chair, his head in his hands. His once straight back seemed to have stooped. I knew his pain was 100 times greater than mine. On one side, his grandson was in critical condition. On the other, his only son was fighting for his life. Both pains were tearing him apart. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doors to Leo opened. A young doctor stepped out, removing his mask. Arthur and I rushed forward. "Doctor, my son, my grandson. How is he?" The doctor gave us a small, reassuring smile. "You were lucky you brought him in time. The boy had a febrile seizure caused by a viral infection. We've managed to lower his fever and stabilize him. He's out of immediate danger, but will need to be monitored for a few days." Hearing this, my legs gave out and I sank to the floor, tears of joy streaming down my face. My son was saved. Thank God. Arthur let out a long sigh of relief and helped me up. "That's wonderful. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much." Leo was moved to the pediatric ward. Seeing him sleeping peacefully in his bed, his face still pale, but his breathing steady, a true sense of peace finally settled over me. I sat by his bed, holding his tiny hand to my cheek. As long as he was here, no other storm mattered. Arthur stood at the doorway for a long time, watching us, then quietly turned and left. A short while later, he returned, holding a key and a small piece of paper. He handed them to me. "Chloe, take these." I looked at him confused. "What is this, Dad?" "It's the key to the safe in my office. The combination is Leo's birthday," he said, his voice low and strangely resolute. "Inside are the company seal, the deeds to all our properties, and several stock portfolios. From now on, you will hold on to them." I was so stunned, I almost dropped the key. "Dad, what are you saying? Why would you give these to me?" Arthur looked me straight in the eye, his expression no longer vacant, but filled with steely determination. "I've been weak for too long. I stayed silent and let you and your son suffer. The price we've paid today is too high. Whether Ethan lives or dies, he no longer has the right to manage this family. As for your mother-in-law, she has been blinded by money and indulgence." He squeezed my hand that held the key. "Chloe, I know you are a good, strong, and sensible person. I can't trust anyone else but you. From now on, you will make all the decisions for this family. Use these to protect yourself and to raise Leo properly. Don't let anyone bully you ever again. Not even your mother-in-law." His words, his trust, brought tears to my eyes. My father-in-law, the man I always thought of as stern and distant, was the one who saw everything and was now handing me a sword and a shield to defend myself. I held the key, feeling its weight, not just the weight of metal, but the weight of responsibility, of a new future opening before me. Dear listeners, witnessing the sacrifice and ultimate pain of a mother and wife, many of us surely feel a lump in our throats. If you believe that Chloe, our protagonist, deserves a chance to stand up and fight for herself and her son, please don't hesitate to give this video a like. Every like is a word of encouragement, an invisible source of strength to give her courage on her difficult but promising journey toward a new dawn. Just then, a nurse from Ethan's ER ran toward us, out of breath. "Sir, the doctor needs to speak with Ethan Hayes' family immediately." Arthur flinched and stood up. I instinctively moved to follow, but the nurse added something that made both of us freeze. "And the patient's wife just arrived. She's making a scene out there, demanding to see her husband." The patient's wife. I was standing right here. Could she be talking about Jessica? Did she have the audacity to show up here posing as Ethan's wife? The nurse's words were like a thunderclap, leaving both Arthur and me speechless. I was Ethan Hayes' legal wife, the woman who had been with him for 6 years, the mother of his child. So, who was the woman causing a scene? It had to be Jessica. Her audacity had surpassed any limit I could have imagined. She hadn't just stolen my husband. Now she was trying to steal my identity. Right here, Arthur's face darkened. Without a word, he turned and strode purposefully toward Ethan's emergency room. I hurried after him, a fire of rage burning inside me. I wanted to see her. I wanted to see the face of the woman who had destroyed my family. The hallway leading to Ethan's ER was already chaotic. From a distance, I could hear a familiar, shrill, screeching voice. "Do you know who I am? I'm Ethan Hayes' wife. My husband is in there. Why won't you let me in? What if something happens to him? Can you bear that responsibility?" In the middle of a small crowd of nurses and hospital security guards, there stood Jessica, dressed to the nines as if for a party. She wore a tight scarlet-red dress, heavy makeup, and teetering high heels. She looked nothing like a worried wife, but more like a queen inspecting her domain, furious that her subjects were disobeying her. "Stop this." Arthur's voice boomed, sharp and authoritative, cutting through Jessica's tirade. Everyone turned in surprise. When Jessica saw Arthur, her face showed a flicker of unease, but it was quickly replaced by a brazen confidence. She ran to him, throwing herself into his arms, and began her tearful performance. Dad, you're here. Look at these people. They won't let me see Ethan. He's in there, and I don't know if he's alive or dead. I'm so worried, Dad," she sobbed dramatically, pointing at the nurses and guards as if she were the victim. The onlookers, unaware of the situation, began to whisper amongst themselves, looking at us with sympathy. Arthur coldly removed her hands and pushed her away. His eyes, fixed on her, held no warmth, only contempt and disgust. "What right do you have to call me, Dad?" His question stunned Jessica. The fake smile on her lips froze. "Dad, what are you saying? I'm Ethan's wife." Arthur let out a harsh, chilling laugh. "His legal wife, the mother of my grandson, is standing right here. You are nothing more than a home wrecking a third party who destroyed a family. You have no right to be here." He then turned to me, his gaze softening. He took my hand and held it up for everyone to see. "This is my daughter-in-law, the only wife the Hayes family will ever acknowledge." Arthur's sudden reversal shocked everyone present. Jessica's face turned from red to white. She was speechless. She never could have imagined that the future father-in-law she had been trying so hard to win over would expose her so brutally in public. Just then, the emergency room doors opened. An older doctor emerged, his face weary. "Who is the family of patient Ethan Hayes?" Arthur and I stepped forward. "That's us. How is our son, doctor?" The doctor looked at us, shook his head, and sighed. "We did everything we could. The patient suffered severe traumatic brain injury from the impact. He's stable now, and we've saved his life." But he paused as if searching for the least painful words. "But the brain damage is extensive. It's highly likely he will never wake up. He will live in a persistent vegetative state." A vegetative state. The word struck me like a physical blow. Even though the love was gone, hearing that the man I had once shared my life with would spend the rest of his days as a soulless body still filled me with a sense of sorrow. But the one who completely broke down was Jessica. "No, that's impossible," she screamed, her voice shrill and crazed. "Ethan can't be like this. He promised to marry me to give me a life of luxury. You're lying. All of you are lying to me." She lunged forward, trying to force her way into the ER, but was restrained by security guards. Greed and desperation had turned her into a wild animal, devoid of reason. "Let me go, Ethan. My money, my mansion, my cars." She shrieked and struggled, Her delirious words unintentionally exposed everything. The crowd now understood. They looked at her with contempt. She wasn't here because she was worried about Ethan's life. She was worried about the fortune he had promised her. Arthur signaled to security. "Get her out of here. Don't let her filth contaminate this place." Jessica was dragged away by two strong guards, still screaming curses. Her flashy red figure disappeared down the hall, leaving behind a heavy silence and a tragedy whose curtain had just fallen. I stood there watching, feeling no satisfaction, only a deep melancholic sadness. Human greed is a terrifying thing. It can turn a beautiful young woman into a monster willing to trample on life and morality. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, arrived at the hospital shortly after, likely tipped off by someone. The moment she saw Arthur and me standing outside the ER, she rushed over, not to ask about her son, but to point a finger straight at my face and scream, "It's you. You curse. You've ruined my son. From the day you set foot in our house, my family has never known a day of peace. Now you've done this to him. Are you satisfied now?" Her venomous words echoed through the hallway. Arthur could bear it no longer. He roared, "Be quiet. Do you have any idea what your precious son just did? He locked his wife and his feverish child in the cellar to go fool around with his mistress. His accident was his own damn fault. It was karma." Eleanor was stunned by her husband's rage, but she quickly retorted, "You're defending her. You always defend that country bumpkin. What kind of spell has she put on you?" Arthur trembled with fury, raising his hand to strike his wife. I quickly intervened. "Dad, please stop. This is a hospital." I knew that now a new war within my family was just beginning. A war between justice and humanity on one side and blind cruel selfishness on the other. And I, once a victim, had been thrust into the center of it. In the following days, the hospital became my second home. My life was split in two, half spent in the pediatric ward with Leo, the other half running over to the intensive care unit to check on Ethan. Leo's fever was completely gone, and he was back to his laughing, chattering self. But the trauma of that night still seemed to haunt him. He would sometimes startle in his sleep, crying out for his father in fear. Each time, my heart broke. I could only hold him close and whisper words of comfort, knowing the scar on his young soul would take a long time to heal. As for Ethan, he lay there motionless and unresponsive. The modern machines around him beeped, in a steady, cold rhythm, the only proof that he was still in this world. The doctors said his condition showed no improvement. He was truly in a vegetative state, a shadow of his former self. I visited him not out of love or duty. Love was dead, and duty had vanished after what he'd done. I went, perhaps out of a final shred of human decency, because he was, after all, my son's father. I would stand there looking at the man who was once my entire world, feeling nothing, no love, no hate, just a painful alien emptiness. After her outburst at the hospital, Eleanor no longer dared to raise her voice at me. The stark truth about her precious son, combined with Arthur's firm stance, seemed to have intimidated her, but I knew it was only a temporary silence. Inside that woman was a volcano of resentment waiting to erupt. She visited Ethan often, but always chose times when I wasn't there. She came and went like a ghost, her eyes always fixed on me like daggers. My life drifted on in a state of exhaustion and stagnation. Until one afternoon, as I was peeling an apple for Leo, Arthur walked into the room. He looked much older, but his eyes were firm. He sat down and looked at me for a long time before speaking, his voice low and clear. "Chloe, you can't live like this forever." I looked up, not understanding. "Leo is well now, and Ethan, he will likely never wake up. You have your whole future ahead of you. You can't bury your youth in this hospital in the shadow of a man who is no longer himself." "But what am I supposed to do, Dad?" I asked, my voice filled with confusion. "I don't know where to go." "Go home," Arthur replied simply, "and start learning to be the master of your own life. I told you from now on you will be the one making the decisions. I want you to go back not as a submissive daughter-in-law but as the head of this family." His words left me speechless. Me, a woman who had only known the kitchen and her child. How could I possibly manage an entire estate, a major corporation? "I can't do it, Dad. I don't know the first thing about business." Arthur smiled, a rare sight on his weathered face. "No one is born knowing everything. If you don't know, you learn. When I first started, I was just a mechanic with nothing to my name. What matters isn't what you know, but whether you have the courage to do it." He looked deep into my eyes, his gaze imbuing me with an invisible strength. "Chloe, you are intelligent, patient, and most importantly, you have a kind heart. Those are things money can't buy, things that Ethan and his mother will never have. I believe in you. Do it for yourself and for Leo's future." That day, my son and I left the hospital and returned to the mansion I thought I would never want to see again. But this time, my mindset was completely different. I was no longer a shadow, a guest in my own home. I returned as someone who was about to learn how to fight for what was hers. As I stepped through the familiar doorway, I saw Eleanor sitting enthroned on the sofa, arms crossed, her sharp eyes scanning my son and me. "So, you're back. I thought you were planning to leave for good." I said nothing, simply leading Leo past her. "Stop," she barked. "Who gave you permission to leave without my consent? Do you even consider me your mother-in-law anymore?" I stopped and slowly turned to face her, looking directly into her eyes. My gaze no longer held the fear and submissiveness of before, but a calm that was almost cold. "Mother, I have returned to my home. I've brought my son to his room. I don't believe I need anyone's permission for that." My attitude stunned Eleanor. She had probably never seen me talk back to her like this. You, she stammered, speechless with rage. Just then, Arthur came down from the upper floor. "Are you trying to cause trouble again?" he growled. "Chloe just brought our grandson home from the hospital. If you can't say a single kind word, then at least don't look for a fight." Eleanor shot up from her seat. "Look at her, Arthur. She doesn't respect anyone anymore. She probably thinks that with Ethan lying there, she can take over and seize all the family's assets, doesn't she?" "Yes," Arthur replied, his voice firm. "From now on, all assets of this family, all major decisions in the company will be decided by Chloe alone. That is my decision. Do you have a problem with that?" Eleanor's jaw dropped. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her plans to control the finances, to bring in a distant nephew as the new heir, all evaporated into thin air. She looked at me with an expression of pure hatred. "Fine, very well, you too, very well," she seethed, then stormed off to her room. I knew that from this moment on, the war in my family had truly begun, but I was no longer afraid. I had my father-in-law's support, and most importantly, I had a reason to fight. In the days that followed, I began to acquaint myself with a completely alien world. Arthur became my mentor. He took me to the company, introduced me to key executives. He taught me how to read financial reports, analyze the market, and negotiate with partners. At first, I was completely lost. Everything was new and complex. But through perseverance and relentless effort, I gradually began to understand. I stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning studying documents. I was the first to arrive and the last to leave, attending every single meeting. My transformation surprised everyone in the company, from the most demanding directors to the rank-and-file employees, and they slowly began to respect me. While digging into the company's affairs, I discovered many irregularities, unexplained expenses, ridiculously overpriced contracts with shell companies, projects with mysterious cost overruns, all bearing Ethan's signature. It seemed he was not only a philandering husband, but also someone who had been using his position to embezzle from the company for years. A gut feeling told me Jessica wasn't the only other woman in his life, and that fateful trip to the Hamptons was probably more than just a romantic getaway. The deeper I delved into the company's paperwork, the more a chill ran down my spine. The business world that Ethan and his family had built was not as glamorous or transparent as it appeared. It was a tangled web of shady relationships, cleverly forged numbers, and huge sums of money that had vanished into thin air. Every one of Ethan's signatures on those documents felt like a mockery of my naivety over the years. I had thought he was a brilliant husband, dedicated to his career. It turned out his brilliance was used to siphon the sweat and effort of his own father. Arthur, after handing over the reins to me, seemed to have shed a great burden. He didn't interfere directly, serving only as a patient advisor and mentor. Every night after Leo was asleep, we would sit in the study surrounded by towering stacks of files. He showed me how to spot a disadvantageous contract, how to track cash flow, how to see through the lies that numbers could tell. In business, you can't fully trust anyone, not even those closest to you, he said, his eyes distant. Greed can turn a friend into an enemy, a loved one into a stranger. His words were a bitter summary of his own family's tragedy. I decided to start with the largest and most unusual expenditures. My eyes landed on a series of regular monthly transfers to a company with a very elegant name, Elion Designs LLC. Each transfer was for tens of thousands of dollars, labeled as project consultation phase. But the strange thing was this company had never appeared on our list of official partners. I asked Arthur. He shook his head, having never heard the name. A phantom consulting firm, or was this Ethan's channel for laundering money? I decided I had to find out more. I turned to David, a young, intelligent sales manager who was fiercely loyal to Arthur. He was one of the few at the company who wasn't in Eleanor's or Ethan's camp. After I explained the situation, David agreed without hesitation. "Don't worry, Chloe. Leave it to me. I've suspected something was off for a long time, but never had the chance to speak up." Just 2 days later, David brought me a file. The information inside was staggering. Elian Designs was a real company, but it wasn't a construction consulting firm. It was a high-end interior design and luxury furniture business. And the legal representative, the owner of the company, was none other than Jessica. A cold dread washed over me. So, that was it. Ethan had used the guise of consulting fees to legitimize funneling company money to his mistress. He hadn't just given her pocket money. He had bankrolled an entire company for her. His love for her was clearly more than a fleeting passion. But that wasn't all. David had found something even more damning. "Chloe, look at this," he said, pointing to an address on Elysian Designs' business license. "Does this address look familiar?" I squinted. It was the address of a luxury condo in a new development in Soho. I froze. This was the same apartment Ethan had lied to me about, claiming he bought it as an investment for our future to rent out. It turned out the future he was talking about was his future with Jessica. They had built their own love nest right under my nose with my family's money. The anger and pain of betrayal surged through me again. I thought I had become numb, that I had no feelings left. But no, this wound was still too deep. I had been to that apartment once. Ethan had lied, saying he was taking me to see a model unit. I still remembered the feeling of awe at its modern luxury. I still remembered him whispering in my ear, "One day, I'll buy an even more beautiful home for you and Leo." It was all a lie. A perfect performance. "Chloe, I found this, too." David's voice pulled me back to reality. He handed me a USB drive. "This is a recording from the security camera in the building's hallway. It took a lot of effort to get it." My hand trembled as I plugged the USB into my computer. A video appeared. It was footage from the afternoon of the day Ethan had his accident. In the video, Ethan and Jessica were holding hands, laughing, and talking as they stepped out of the elevator. Ethan was carrying the very travel bag I had packed for him. They weren't going to the Hamptons. Their destination was this apartment. They were about to start their romantic getaway right there. I fast-forwarded. About 2 hours later, Ethan left alone. He looked rushed, talking on the phone with someone, his expression tense. He got in his car and sped off. That must have been when he received an urgent work call and rushed onto the highway, leading to his fateful accident. So, the Hamptons trip was just a lie to deceive me. His real paradise was so much closer. Do you see, listeners? Sometimes the truth is more brutal and cruel than we can imagine. A devoted wife dedicated to her family was deceived so brazenly by the husband she loved. If this story has touched your heart, if you feel outrage at the betrayal and sympathy for the wife, please share this video. Let's spread this story as a cautionary tale for the women around us so they can recognize and protect themselves from liars and to give Chloe more strength in her fight for the justice she so thoroughly deserves. I closed the laptop, my head spinning. This evidence was more than enough to expose Ethan and Jessica. But I didn't want to stop there. Someone who could orchestrate such an elaborate deception for years, surely his crimes weren't limited to embezzlement and adultery. I had a strong feeling that Ethan's accident might not have been an accident at all and that the secrets behind the projects he managed were far more sinister. With irrefutable proof in my hands, I could have immediately blown the whistle on everything, ruining Jessica's reputation and leaving Eleanor with no face to show anyone. But I didn't. A surprise attack might bring temporary satisfaction, but it wouldn't solve the root of the problem. Moreover, my instincts about Ethan's other dark secrets urged me to act more cautiously. I needed to peel back his layers one by one, carefully and surely until the rotten core was fully exposed to the light. I decided not to expose them immediately, but to start by cutting off their lifeblood, money. My plan began on a bright Monday morning. I woke up earlier than usual, chose a navy blue power suit, and applied light but sharp makeup. I looked at myself in the mirror, no longer the weak, submissive Chloe of yesterday. My eyes now held a steely resolve and a hint of coldness. Today, I would make my first move. I went to the office and called an emergency meeting with the accounting department and David. To everyone's surprise, I issued a decisive order. As of today, I am ordering a review and temporary suspension of all payments for consulting contracts with Elian Designs. Furthermore, freeze all supplementary corporate credit cards issued to non-employees. The head of accounting, a middle-aged woman known to be one of Eleanor's loyalists, immediately objected. "Miss Hayes, we can't do that. The contracts with Elian Designs were personally approved by CEO Ethan Hayes and have been paid regularly for 2 years. As for the supplementary cards, one of them belongs to the chairman's wife, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. If we freeze it without authorization, when she finds out, I cut her off." My voice quiet but powerful enough to silence the room. "What did you just say?" "The chairman's wife. To my knowledge, the current chairman of the board is Mr. Arthur Hayes. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, holds no official position in this company. So, on what grounds is she using a corporate credit card with no spending limit? The head accountant was speechless, her face pale. As for Elysian Designs, I continued, my sharp gaze sweeping over everyone. I suspect this company is a front for money laundering. I have already asked our legal department to investigate. Until we have a definitive result, all transactions are to be halted. This is my order. As the acting head of this company with the full authority of Chairman Arthur Hayes, does anyone have any objections? The meeting room was dead silent. The power Arthur had given me was now in full effect. No one dared to argue. As I expected, the storm broke just a few hours later. The first person to call me was Eleanor. She was at a high-end department store and her familiar black card had been declined. You? What did you do to my card? She screeched into the phone, her voice filled with rage. You dare to lock my card? Do you know who I am? I replied calmly, my voice even. Mother, I am simply following company policy. Corporate credit cards are for employees for business-related expenses. You are not an employee, so I was forced to revoke it. You dare to lecture me. This company belongs to my family. I can spend whatever I want. Mother, the company is an independent legal entity, not the personal property of anyone. From now on, for all personal expenses, please use your own money. I said, then hung up, giving her no chance to curse me further. I could imagine her face. She must have been furious enough to burst. Her life of luxury and endless shopping sprees brought to an abrupt end. The next person to find me was Jessica. She didn't call. She came straight to the office. She was still fashionably dressed, but her face lacked its usual arrogant confidence. She was stopped at the reception desk. I watched her on the security monitor from my office. She tried to look pitiful, telling the receptionist she had an urgent matter to report to me. I let her up. Entering my office, Jessica looked around with envious eyes. Chloe, she began, her voice sickeningly sweet. I heard our company is suspending the contract with my firm. Is there some kind of misunderstanding? Our contract is still valid. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pen. There is no misunderstanding, Miss Walker. Our company is simply in the process of reviewing the effectiveness of our partners, and we've noticed that besides receiving regular monthly payments, your company seems to provide no actual consulting value. Jessica's expression shifted. What do you mean by that? The contract was signed by Ethan himself. He knows best the value we bring. Oh, really? I gave a faint smile. Then would you mind showing me any work reports, acceptance records, or any consulting products your company has delivered to us over the past 2 years? Jessica was at a loss for words. Of course, she had none of those things. They were all fake contracts. You're deliberately making things difficult for me. If Ethan finds out, he won't let you get away with this. She resorted to threats. I stood up, walked over to her, and whispered close to her ear, just loud enough for the two of us to hear. Ethan, you think he can do anything to me now? Perhaps you should worry about yourself first. Do you think I don't know where the money for your Soho apartment came from? Or who paid for that sports car you're driving? Miss Walker, you should remember that what isn't yours must eventually be returned, sometimes with interest. Jessica's entire body trembled, her face deathly white. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and hatred. She never expected I knew everything. Get out, I said, my voice like ice. Before I call security, Jessica stumbled backward, not daring to say another word, and fled as if she'd seen a ghost. My first move was a resounding success. I had cut off 2 leeches that were draining the company dry. But I knew this was just the beginning. When cornered, wild animals become more dangerous than ever. And I had a feeling Eleanor and Jessica wouldn't stay down for long. The real fight was just about to begin. Just as I predicted, the silence from Eleanor and Jessica was merely the calm before the storm, cut off from their financial sources and lavish lifestyles. Those 2 women had nothing left to lose. And when people have nothing to lose, they can do the most insane things. Their counterattack wasn't aimed at the company or its assets. It was aimed directly at the one thing I cared about and my greatest weakness right now, my reputation. They wanted to destroy me, to turn me into a villain in everyone's eyes so that I could no longer hold my head high and fight back. The storm began with whispers. Rumors spread with deliberate intent. At first, it was within the company. People started whispering behind my back that I was an inhuman wife who, while her husband lay helpless, conspired with her father-in-law to seize power, that I was a snake they had nurtured in their home for years, only to turn around and bite them. I knew these rumors were being spread by the head accountant, Eleanor's crony. I ignored them. I focused on my work, believing my actions would be the best response. But I had underestimated their viciousness. When the office gossip wasn't enough to bring me down, they decided to take the story public, turning it into a melodrama to win the public sympathy. One morning, as I arrived at the office, David rushed into my office, his face pale. "Chloe, we have a problem. You need to see this." He placed a tabloid newspaper on my desk. On the front page, a sensational headline screamed at me. "The ugly truth behind a billionaire's tragedy. Wife's twisted affair and plot to seize fortune as husband lies dying." Below was a long tear-jerking article. It spun a completely fabricated story. It claimed Ethan and I were a happy couple until I had an affair with another man, heavily implying it was David. When Ethan found out, he was so heartbroken that he drove recklessly and caused the accident. The article went on to accuse me of not even visiting my husband in the hospital. Instead, colluding with my father-in-law to take over the company, kick my mother-in-law out of her home, and cut off all her financial support. Accompanying the article were purposefully taken photos. A picture of David and me working late at the office, captioned, "The lover's secret rendezvous behind the unfortunate husband's back." A photo of Eleanor crying outside the mansion gates from the day she caused a scene. Captioned, "Elderly mother thrown out of her home by cruel daughter-in-law." And most disgustingly, a secretly taken photo of Ethan in his hospital bed with the caption, "The tragic husband abandoned in his time of need." My blood boiled. I couldn't believe they could be so vile. They not only distorted the truth, but also shamelessly used the tragic image of their own son and husband to slander me. "Chloe, this is spreading like wildfire," David said anxiously. "On social media, people are sharing it everywhere. All the gossip forums are talking about you. They're calling you." He hesitated. "Calling me what? Just say it." "They're calling you the venomous viper wife, the most ruthless gold digger of the year." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to control my surging anger. I knew this was a carefully calculated media attack. They wanted to use public pressure to destroy me. My phone started ringing nonstop. Business partners, investors, even old friends, all calling to ask about the story. The company's inbox was flooded with hate mail. The company's stock, which had been recovering, started to dip again. "Chloe, what do we do now? Should we hold a press conference to set the record straight?" David asked urgently. I shook my head. "No. The more we deny, the more they'll think we're hiding something. The bigger a scene we make, the more we fall into their trap. They want us to be chaotic and lose our focus. So, we just let them slander us like this." "Of course not." I opened my eyes, my gaze cold and determined. "They want to play this game. I'll play with them, but not by their rules." "David, I need you to find out which reporter wrote this article and which publication ran it first. I want to know who is backing them." I knew the best way to put out a fire isn't to pour water on the flames, but to find and cut off its oxygen supply. Eleanor and Jessica were just puppets. There had to be a smarter, more malicious puppeteer pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Someone who knew how to manipulate the media and public opinion. Jessica had connections in the entertainment world. Had she enlisted some powerful force? This was no longer just a family feud. It had become a war on the media front. A war where one small mistake could cost me everything. But I wasn't afraid. They had underestimated me. They thought a woman who was only used to the kitchen would easily crumble under public scrutiny. They didn't know that even a worm will turn. And a woman cornered while protecting her honor and her child is more fearsome than any storm. The media storm was more ferocious than I had imagined. My name was dragged through the mud everywhere from tabloids to social media forums. My photos were turned into malicious memes. People fabricated all sorts of stories about my past, twisting my narrative from a sympathetic orphan into a scheming, manipulative gold digger. The pressure from public opinion was an invisible but devastating weapon. Employees at the company started looking at me differently with suspicion and distance. A few partners began to hesitate, delaying the signing of new contracts. The ship I was trying to right was once again in danger of sinking. But the one who was hurt the most wasn't me. One afternoon, I went to pick up Leo from school. He didn't run out to hug me as usual. He walked out slowly, head down, his eyes red and swollen. "Leo, what's wrong? Did someone bully you?" I knelt down, worried. He didn't answer, just shook his head and buried his face in my chest, sobbing. I held him, my heart aching. I knew why he was crying. Those vicious rumors weren't just aimed at me. They were stabbing daggers into my son's innocent soul. That night, I called Arthur and told him everything. His voice, on the other end, was grim, filled with anger, but also calm. "I know, the company's lawyer reported it this morning. Don't worry, Chloe. It's just the dirty tricks of petty people. You stay focused on your work. Let me handle everything outside." "But Dad, Leo," my voice choked. "I understand. Bring him to my house for a few days. We have people to look after him here. No one will bother him. As for you, you need to be even stronger. This is the moment to prove your strength." His words were like a sedative, helping me regain my composure. He was right. I couldn't fall. I was fighting not just for myself, but for my son. While I temporarily retreated from the storm, David worked efficiently. He found the person behind the first article, a freelance reporter named Rick, notorious for his unethical methods and willingness to sell his pen to the highest bidder, and the person who had provided the information, photos, and a large sum of money to Rick was none other than Jessica. She had used her connections in the entertainment world to launch this attack, but one detail caught my attention. David reported that according to his sources, the amount of money Jessica paid Rick and his media network was far beyond her current financial means. Where did that money come from? I had cut off Eleanor's funds, and Jessica's contract had been suspended. Could there be a third party, a mysterious benefactor pulling all the strings? The thought made me shudder. This fight was more complex than I had thought. But whoever it was, my immediate goal was to put out this fire, and the only way to do that was to make the arsonists douse the flames themselves. I decided against a press conference or a public feud. I would build my own stage and invite them all to perform their final act. I told Arthur my plan. At first, he was hesitant as it was risky, but after I explained my reasoning, he was convinced. All right, do as you see fit. I'll arrange everything. My plan was simple. I would organize an extended family meeting under the pretext of reconciliation and finding a common ground for Leo's future. The guests would include not only Eleanor and Jessica, but also the senior elders of the Hayes family, the most respected voices. I would also accidentally leak information about this meeting to the reporter Rick. I was certain he wouldn't miss a golden opportunity for such exclusive news. The stage was set. The script was written. All that was left was for the main actors to walk into the perfect trap I had laid. Dear listeners, a grand play is about to conclude. Will Chloe, with her intelligence and courage, be able to turn the tables and expose the true faces of those who wronged her? What conspiracies and secrets will be revealed at this fateful family meeting? To not miss a single thrilling detail and to accompany our protagonist on her journey to justice, please subscribe to Echoes of the Past right now, because what's about to happen will surely keep you glued to your screen. The meeting was set for a weekend afternoon at the Hayes family estate. The location was symbolic. It was the seat of power, the guardian of the family's legacy and principles. And today it would witness the downfall of those who had used that legacy as a shield for their vile deeds. I arrived early with Arthur to prepare. I wasn't wearing a suit, but a simple white silk dress with minimal makeup. I wanted to appear as a daughter-in-law and a mother, not a cold businesswoman. Eleanor and Jessica arrived together. Eleanor was still playing the victim, her eyes red, needing support to walk. Jessica wore a somber black dress, looking respectable, but unable to hide the triumphant glint in her eyes. She probably thought I had been forced to surrender to appeal to the family's judgment. The family elders arrived one by one. They were all older, reputable individuals. Their eyes held a mix of scrutiny and pity as they looked at me. I knew the rumors had influenced them. When everyone was seated, I stood and bowed. Uncles, aunts, cousins, thank you for coming. I've taken the liberty of inviting you all here today to resolve the misunderstandings and conflicts that have troubled our family. I know these unfortunate events have affected the honor of our family name, and for that I am truly sorry. My voice was sincere and humble. Seeing her chance, Eleanor began her act. Chloe, it's good that you recognize your mistakes, she sniffled. What mother doesn't love her son? What wife doesn't love her husband? But before she could finish, a few unfamiliar figures appeared at the gate, brandishing cameras. The real show was about to begin. The unexpected arrival of the press made the already tense atmosphere in the formal drawing room even more suffocating. The elders frowned in disapproval. Eleanor and Jessica exchanged a knowing, triumphant look. They thought this was their backup, arranged to pressure me, and turn this family meeting into a public trial where I was the defendant. Arthur started to get up to have security remove them, but I gave him a subtle shake of my head, signaling him to remain calm. Everything was going according to my script. My apologies, everyone. It seems someone has leaked information about our meeting, I said, feigning slight distress. But since it has come to this, I think it might be for the best. With the press as witnesses, everything will be fair and transparent. I have nothing to hide. Hearing this, Eleanor and Jessica looked even more smug. They had no idea that this group of reporters, including Rick, had been invited by a secret source I had arranged, and the envelopes they had received were much thicker than anything Jessica had paid. Very well, if Chloe says so, one of the most respected elders spoke up. Then let us begin. Tell us what has happened. Eleanor didn't give me a chance to speak first. She immediately stood up and launched into her tearful monologue. She recounted the perfectly fabricated story from the tabloids. How I had been unfaithful, how heartbroken she was to discover my affair, how I had ruthlessly seized the family assets and kicked her out of her own home. She acted so convincingly that even I almost believed her tragic tale. The camera flashes were relentless. When she finished, Jessica seamlessly took over. She didn't cry. She portrayed herself as a concerned outsider who couldn't stand by and watch an injustice. "Uncles Ethan and I were just close friends," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "Because I was so close to him, I witnessed his pain when Chloe betrayed him. I tried many times to persuade Chloe to reconsider, to return to her family, but she wouldn't listen. She even said," she paused, feigning reluctance, "that she couldn't waste her life with a husband who was about to become an invalid." That last line was a knife to the heart, vicious. Her cruelty knew no bounds. She not only slandered me, but also used the most heartless words to describe the man she called a close friend. A murmur went through the room. All eyes were now on me, filled with judgment and reproach. Rick, the reporter, was scribbling furiously, a smug look on his face. Their performance was perfect. They had successfully painted me as an unforgivable villain. I listened to it all in silence. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue. I let them perform. Let them expose their own fake dirty faces. When the room was buzzing with whispers when I had become the focus of their condemnation, I slowly stood up. "Are you finished?" My voice was unnervingly calm. My composure surprised everyone. They were likely expecting a breakdown. "A plea for mercy, not this. Your performance was truly outstanding." I clapped softly, a purely sarcastic gesture. "If I weren't in the middle of it, I might have believed you. But unfortunately for you, I didn't come here today to watch a play. I came here to show you another one, a play called The Truth." With that, I signaled to David. He connected his laptop to a large projection screen that had been set up beforehand. "First, let's review the close friendship between Miss Walker and my husband." The security footage from the Soho condo building played. The image of Ethan and Jessica holding hands, embracing intimately, appeared in crystal clear detail. The room went silent. Jessica's face went white. "No, that's a doctored video." "Doctored?" I laughed coldly. "Then what about these?" A series of bank transfers from Ethan's account to Jessica, deeds to the condo, and the title for a sports car, all in Jessica's name, flashed on the screen. "Miss Walker, your friendship with my husband is quite valuable. It's worth a condo and a sports car. I wonder, does your friendship have a price tag?" Jessica collapsed into her chair, utterly defeated. All eyes now turned to her with disgust. "Next, let's talk about my mother-in-law's suffering." I shifted my focus to Eleanor. "You said I cruelly threw you out of the house. I wonder if you remember this conversation." An audio recording I had secretly made on my phone played. Eleanor's sharp, bitter voice filled the room. "She probably thinks that with Ethan lying there, she can take over and seize all the family's assets, doesn't she?" Then came Arthur's firm voice. "From now on, all assets of this family, all major decisions in the company will be decided by Chloe alone." The recording ended. Everyone now understood. It wasn't me who kicked her out. She had left in a rage because her power and access to company funds had been cut off, and then she had fabricated the story to frame me. And finally, my voice hardened, my eyes locking on to Eleanor and Jessica regarding the story of my affair and my plot to seize the assets. "This is the real truth." I played the final recording. It was a conversation between David and the reporter Rick, which David had secretly recorded. In the audio, Rick admitted everything. It was Miss Walker who hired me. She gave me a huge sum of money, provided all the info and photos, and told me to write a shocking story. The more I could slander Miss Hayes, the better. She said if she could take Miss Hayes down, she would have everything, and she wouldn't forget my share. Every scheme, every dirty trick was laid bare. The room was plunged into a dreadful silence. The elders' faces were purple with rage. The reporters were in a frenzy, their cameras aimed squarely at the two women who now sat stunned, their faces drained of all color. Eleanor and Jessica were utterly defeated. They had dug their own graves, and I had just pushed them in, burying them in shame and disgrace. Their play was over, but mine, the final judgment, was still to come. The family meeting ended in chaos and humiliation for Eleanor and Jessica. Faced with irrefutable evidence, they had nothing to say in their defense. The family elders, after learning the truth, were furious. They, on behalf of the entire family, bowed their heads in apology to me and Arthur for their misguided judgment and promptly disowned Ella Laner, declaring her a disgrace to the family name. Eleanor, once a powerful matriarch, now had nothing, no money, no honor, and no family. She fainted on the spot and was taken to the hospital, shunned by everyone. Jessica was swarmed by the press. She tried frantically to escape, but there was nowhere to run. Sharp questions were hurled at her. "Miss Walker, did you orchestrate the smear campaign against Miss Hayes?" What is your true relationship with CEO Ethan Hayes? Was the money for your home and car obtained illegally? Her carefully constructed facade was shattered. Her modeling career, her image as a sweet, innocent girl, had crumbled to dust in a single afternoon. As for the reporter Rick, once the recording was made public, he knew he was exposed. He tried to flee but was apprehended by our company's security and handed over to the police. Facing charges of defamation, blackmail, and professional misconduct, his career was over. The curtain had fallen. The villains had paid their price. I thought I would feel triumphant, joyous, but instead, I just felt a bone-deep exhaustion. This war had taken too much from me. I just wanted to go home, hold my son, and forget everything. But it seemed fate wasn't done with me yet. After the meeting, David and I returned to the office to wrap things up. While organizing the files related to the case, David suddenly exclaimed, "Chloe, I just found something really strange." He pointed to his computer screen, which showed Jessica's bank transactions. "Look here." Besides the regular payments from Ethan, her account received a massive one-time transfer of $2 million from an unknown company called Apex Holdings. I frowned. Apex Holdings? I'd never heard of it. Whose company is that? I checked, David said, his expression serious. It's a newly emerged real estate company with very deep pockets. But the shocking part is its legal representative. It's a man named Marcus Hayes, Ethan's distant cousin. The one who was fired from our company 3 years ago for stealing construction materials. Marcus Hayes. I vaguely remembered him. A thuggish-looking man with shifty eyes whom Arthur himself had fired. How could a man like that be the head of a major real estate firm? I found this too, David said, opening another file. It was a map of projects being developed by Apex Holdings. My eyes froze on a project named Via Oceanfront Resort. David, zoom in on the location of that project. He did as I asked. When the map focused, my heart stopped. The project was located on the exact stretch of coastal land in the Hamptons where Ethan had lied about taking us for a vacation. Everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The trip to the Hamptons wasn't just a getaway with his mistress, Marcus Hayes. Apex Holdings. The $2 million transfer to Jessica. It was all connected. And Ethan's accident. It happened on the Long Island Expressway, the main route to the Hamptons. Was that just a coincidence? David, I want you to investigate everything about Apex Holdings and this Marcus Hayes. I want to know where their money comes from, if there's anything shady about their projects, and specifically find out where Marcus Hayes was and what he was doing on the day of Ethan's accident. I ordered my voice firm. A woman's intuition, the intuition of someone who had been deceived, was telling me that behind the affair and embezzlement lay a much more terrifying truth. A truth that might involve life and death. While waiting for David's findings, I decided to visit Ethan at the hospital. Not because I cared, but because I needed answers. He was the most important link in this entire story. He was still lying there in the ICU, unchanged. I sat by his bed quietly looking at the man who was once my husband. His face was still handsome but now pale and lifeless. "Ethan," I said softly, "can you hear me? How many more secrets are you hiding? What were you really going to do in the Hamptons that day? It wasn't just for fun with Jessica, was it?" He didn't respond. Only the steady beep of the heart monitor answered. I sighed, about to leave, when I suddenly saw his finger twitch. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. My heart pounded. I immediately called for a doctor. The doctor examined him for a long time, then turned to me with a look of surprise and joy. "It's a miracle. The patient is showing response to external stimuli. This is a very positive sign. There's a chance he might wake up." I was frozen. Ethan. I could wake up. At this moment, I didn't know whether to consider this good news or bad. If he woke up, he would have to face the reality that his family was in ruins, his mother was a broken woman, and he himself was entangled in a web of deadly secrets. And more importantly, if he woke up, would the people lurking in the shadows let him live? Or would they do everything in their power to silence him for good? The news that Ethan might wake up spread like lightning, bringing not just hope, but also immense danger. I knew the shadowy figures behind this would not sit idly by. Ethan, once a perpetrator, was now a key witness, a ticking time bomb that could destroy everything. I immediately had Arthur tighten security at the hospital. Our most trusted guards were posted outside the ICU 247 THS. Anyone entering, including doctors and nurses, was thoroughly screened. I was in a race against time, a race against criminals trying to silence their last witness. Meanwhile, David's investigation into Apex Holdings yielded shocking results. "Chloe, I can't believe it." David's voice was horrified over the phone. "Every single one of their projects is dirty. They're buying up farmland from people at dirt cheap prices through intimidation. then using shady connections to rezone the land and sell it for a fortune. This is an organized crime ring. What about their funding? I asked, a sense of dread growing. That's the most terrifying part. David paused. Apex Holdings' cash flow is linked to an international money laundering operation, and it's connected to some of our company's old projects, the ones Ethan was in charge of. So, it was clear Ethan hadn't just embezzled company funds to support his mistress. He was a key player in a much larger criminal network. He had used his power to turn his father's company into a tool for a crime syndicate. Marcus Hayes was just a pawn. The real mastermind had to be someone incredibly powerful. David, what about the accident? I checked the highway cameras and witness statements. It looked like Ethan was speeding and lost control. But there's one strange detail. About 10 minutes before the crash, Ethan's car was forced to the shoulder by an unmarked black truck. They stopped for a moment, then drove on. A witness described the truck driver as a man with a large scar on his face. A black truck, a man with a scar. My instinct screamed that this was no ordinary traffic accident. This was an internal purge. Perhaps Ethan knew too much or had done something to displease his superiors and they had tried to eliminate him. But why did he survive? Maybe it was luck. Or maybe it was fate forcing him to live, to face his sins, and to bring everything to light. I took all this information to a special investigative unit within the police force that Arthur had secretly contacted. These were people we could trust. A major case was opened. The net was being cast, waiting for the big fish to swim into it. Dear listeners, our story is reaching its most thrilling climax. An organized crime ring, bloody assassination plots. It's all beyond our initial imagination. Who do you think the final mastermind is? Will Ethan wake up to expose the crimes? And what will Chloe do to bring the culprits to justice? Leave your comments below. Every opinion, every prediction is part of this journey for the truth. And who knows, your guess might just come true. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Eleanor, upon hearing her son might wake up, came to the hospital crying and begging to see him. I hesitated, but then agreed. I wanted to see what she would do. Under the close watch of our guards, she was allowed into his room alone for 10 minutes. The police and I watched her every move on a hidden camera. Eleanor walked in, saw her motionless son, and broke down. Oh, Ethan, my son, how did it come to this? If something happens to you, how can I go on living? She sobbed. But then her words turned strange. You were so foolish, son. I told you not to get involved with them. They aren't people, they're demons. And now look, you're lying here. And that Chloe is about to turn the world upside down. If you wake up, if you talk, they'll kill us all. Not just you, but me. This entire family. They'll even kill Leo. Shaking, she pulled a small syringe from her pocket filled with a clear liquid. My heart stopped. What was she doing? Was she going to kill her own son to silence him? I'm sorry, my son, she whispered. I'm doing this for your own good. Once you're gone, it will all be over. You'll be at peace. She tremblingly brought the needle closer to Ethan's foreline. Stop, the door burst open. The police and I rushed in. Eleanor jumped, dropping the syringe. What were you doing to your son? I growled. Eleanor was speechless, her face white as a sheet. Were you about to inject him with poison? To silence him. She collapsed to the floor, wailing like a child. I had no choice. They threatened me. They said if Ethan woke up and talked, they would kill my entire family. They would kill Leo. I had no other choice. Her confession was shocking. So there were people even more terrifying than her. People who had pushed a mother to the point where she was willing to murder her own child. This criminal network had truly sunk its tentacles into the darkest corners of human nature. Based on Eleanor's confession and the evidence we had gathered, the police launched a massive raid. Marcus Hayes, the scarred-faced enforcer, and dozens of others in the Apex Holdings network were arrested. But the true mastermind, the most powerful figure, was still at large. He seemed to have sniffed out the danger and vanished without a trace. The war was not yet over. The raid on Apex Holdings sent shockwaves through the city's business and political circles. Several high-ranking officials were suspended pending investigation. Phantom real estate projects were exposed and the international money laundering ring was dismantled. Justice, it seemed, was slowly being served. But for me, the victory felt incomplete. The ultimate mastermind, the man who had caused my family's tragedy and pushed my mother-in-law to the brink, was still an unknown. He had disappeared like a ghost. Meanwhile, a miracle occurred. Ethan, after weeks of being unresponsive, began to wake up. His recovery was slow, but hopeful. He could open his eyes and recognize people, though he couldn't yet speak. I visited him every day, not as a wife, but as the person who held his fate in her hands. I told him everything. I told him how his mother and I had been locked in the cellar, how his own mother had tried to kill him, about the fall of the Hayes family, and about the crimes he himself had committed. I don't know how much he understood. I only saw that with every story, tears would stream down his face. Were they tears of regret or helplessness? I didn't know, and I no longer cared to know. Love, hate, had all faded, leaving only a cold emptiness. The only thing I needed from him now was his testimony. Testimony about the final mastermind. The police tried to question him multiple times, but Ethan still couldn't speak. He could only make muffled sounds and use his eyes to communicate. But his eyes were always filled with absolute terror whenever the man behind the scenes was mentioned. It was as if that name was a taboo, a specter more frightening than death itself. Eleanor, after being caught red-handed, confessed everything she knew. But her information was vague. She only knew of a big boss behind Ethan, someone with immense power who could decide the fate of her entire family. She had been threatened and forced to obey. Due to her cooperation and fragile mental state, she was released on bail under house arrest. Every day, she would come to the hospital and watch her son's room from a distance, never daring to go closer. The once arrogant woman was now just a silent shadow, living with her guilt and belated regret. As for Jessica, when the crime ring was busted, she knew she couldn't escape. She quickly sold her assets and tried to flee the country, but she was arrested at the airport. Facing overwhelming evidence of her complicity in money laundering and fraud along with the defamation charges, she received a fitting sentence from the law. My life slowly returned to a kind of peace, but it was a heavy peace. I faced a difficult choice every day. Ethan was no longer a threat. He was just an invalid who would live the rest of his life in dependency and torment. I could easily file for divorce, cut all ties, and let him fend for himself. It would be sweet revenge, a deserved ending for what he'd done. But whenever I looked at Leo, I couldn't bring myself to do it. He often asked to visit his dad. He would sit by the bed telling his father stories from school, showing him his drawings. He would take his father's hand and press it to his cheek. "Daddy, get well soon so we can play soccer." His innocent words cut me to the core. No matter how terrible a husband and criminal Ethan was, he was still Leo's father. Would robbing my son of his only father be too cruel? I was at a crossroads. One path led to complete revenge where I could shed the past and start a new unburdened life. The other led to forgiveness and incomplete, heavy forgiveness, but one that might preserve a sense of family for my son, however broken it was. Arthur, aged by the ordeal, no longer interfered with my decisions. He only said, "Chloe, do what your heart tells you. Whatever you decide, I will always support you." One afternoon, I was sitting by Ethan's bed, peeling an apple for him out of habit. Suddenly, he spoke. A weak, hoarse, but clear voice. "Chloe." I froze, nearly dropping the knife. I looked up. He was looking at me, his eyes clearer, more present. "I'm sorry." He struggled to get those two words out. Tears streamed down his face again. I looked at him, my heart a tangled mess of emotions. Hatred, pity, the lingering sense of our marriage. It all swirled together. I didn't know how to respond. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was David. "Chloe, we found him. We found his hideout." His voice was ecstatic. "The final mastermind. He's hiding out in a seaside villa in Montauk. The police are on their way." I shot to my feet, my heart pounding. The day had finally come. I looked at Ethan, then out the window at the setting Sunday. Forgiveness or punishment, a peaceful life or a fight to the very end. I had to make the final choice myself, and I knew that whichever path I chose, this storm was not yet truly over. The raid in Montauk was swift and clean. The final mastermind, a powerful and well-respected businessman who had manipulated everything from the shadows, was arrested as he was about to board a yacht to escape the country. He never imagined the criminal empire he had built over decades could collapse so quickly. On the day he was brought back to the city, I went to see, not for satisfaction, but to put a final definitive end to the past. Through the window of the police car, I saw a familiar face. It was the man from some of Arthur's old photographs. A man my father-in-law had once called a friend. Greed truly can turn a friend into a foe, a man into a monster. The case closed with the harshest sentences for the guilty. Justice, though delayed, had been served. My family company's name and honor were cleared. Everything seemed to have returned to its rightful order. After that day, I made my choice. I didn't choose revenge, nor did I choose easy forgiveness. I chose my own path, a path for my son's future and for my own peace of mind. I filed for divorce. The hearing was quiet with no disputes or accusations. Ethan, in his condition, couldn't be present. He sent a letter which his lawyer read aloud. In it, he accepted all my terms, relinquishing all rights to our assets and to custody of our son. He asked for only one thing, to be allowed to see Leo from time to time. I agreed. I did it not for him, but for my son. I didn't want Leo to grow up with a heart full of hatred. I wanted him to know that his father had made mistakes and had paid the price, but he was still his father. After the divorce, I didn't cast Ethan out. I used a portion of my own assets to place him in the best long-term rehabilitation center where he could receive proper care. I did it not out of love, but out of a sense of shared history. The history of 6 years as husband and wife, the duty of one human being to another at their lowest point. It was the last thing I could do for him and for my own conscience. Eleanor, after everything was exposed, had a complete breakdown. She lived as a recluse in an old family property, unable to face anyone. I still had food and medicine sent to her occasionally, not because I had forgiven her, but because I knew that living with her guilt and loneliness for the rest of her life was the heaviest sentence of all. Time passed. 5 years went by. The company under my and Arthur's leadership thrived, becoming a leader in the industry. But for me, the greatest success wasn't the numbers on a financial report, but the smile on my son's face. Leo was now a healthy, smart, and compassionate 5th grader. He knew everything that had happened. I never hid anything from him, but he held no resentment. It only made him love and cherish me more. Occasionally, on weekends, I would take him to visit Ethan. He could now sit in a wheelchair and speak in short sentences. Some of his memory had returned, but the memories of his crimes seemed to have been wiped clean. He only remembered that he had a wife named Chloe and a son named Leo. Every time he saw his son, he would smile a simple childlike smile. Perhaps that too was a form of release for him. One beautiful afternoon, Leo and I were walking in the park. The golden sun bathed the green lawn. "Mommy?" Leo asked suddenly. "Are you happy?" I stopped for a moment, taken aback by his question. I looked at my son, at his bright, clear smile, then up at the vast blue sky. I smiled. A truly serene smile. "Yes, my love. Mommy is very happy. I once thought my life was a long dark night with no escape. I was once locked in a cellar of despair, chained by betrayal and cruelty. But in that very darkness, I found the light of a father's love, of compassion, and of the strength hidden within myself." The cellar door had opened, freeing not just my body, but my soul. My dawn didn't come overnight. It was a long journey through shadows and storms. And now, standing in the warm sunlight, I realized that happiness isn't the absence of pain, but how we face it and overcome it. My new life, my son's new life, was just beginning. A life with no more hatred, only love, forgiveness, and a peaceful sky ahead.